What is it?
It's her Apple Watch.
They never even seized it, did they? They left it in the drawer, right?
Apparently.
It's the piece of evidence in the Lindsay Clancy case that no one can stop talking about.
I don't mean to embarrass you, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
You know why nobody bothered to search that drawer?
And it's the inconsistencies on the Apple Watch that add fuel to the fire.
All right, and after 5:38, it's pretty much blackout. There's no further information or recording, right?
Yes, not until the phone was seized by police, I believe.
If I tell you, sir, that January 25 at 8 o'clock in the morning, Lindsay Clancy was in a coma, laying in a bed with tubes coming out of her body and certainly not wearing her Apple Watch. How did that happen?
This is Scandal, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Sierra Gillespie. As we head into week 5 of the divisive Lindsay Clancy trial, the court of public opinion continues to clock overtime hours, analyzing every detail and piece of evidence presented so far. Some of them don't hold any water, but others really have me thinking, are there some inconsistencies here? And if so, what does this all mean? You of course know I'm talking about the Lindsay Clancy Apple Watch, right? The data collected is slightly suspect.
And so at 5:23 p.m., the last recording of her heart rate was 57.
Correct.
And there aren't any further heart rates reported to the phone after that point, correct?
That's correct. It shows that there was additional flight climb events logged by the phone, which were not logged by the watch.
So we've got different timestamps from Lindsay's Apple Watch to her phone. But what's more is that further movement was collected on January 25th, 2023, the day after Lindsay jumped out of a second-story window. Meaning, at the time of this movement, Lindsay was in a coma in the hospital. So what could this even mean? Could it undermine the expert testimony we heard during the Commonwealth's case in chief? And we can't forget about how the Apple Watch was found either. It's a piece of evidence now. Yes, there was an entire expert witness on the stand for hours dissecting the data collected. And yet, it wasn't police or investigators who found the watch. It was defense attorney Kevin Reddington and Lindsay's ex-husband Patrick who found it in her bedside drawer.
I believe there was an Apple Watch recovered after the fact. We didn't recover at the search warrant, if I recall correctly.
Do you know when it was recovered?
I don't know exactly off the top of my head, no,
The
sir.
Apple Watch that I recovered with Pat Clancy?
I believe so, sir.
We're going to walk you through all of the evidence that was presented to jurors about Lindsay's Apple Watch. And later in the episode, we're going to hear from our expert guest. It's Heather Hansen, Massachusetts native and attorney who specializes in medical malpractice cases and works to prepare expert witnesses for testimony. When I'm telling you she's an expert, she's an expert. And she's going to help me break down what all of this means. But first, we have to start with the basics. The fact that 36-year-old Lindsay Clancy now stands trial for the murder of her 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan Clancy. From the start, Lindsay has maintained she killed the children. On January 24th, 2023, she used exercise bands to strangle the kids in the basement of her Duxbury, Massachusetts home. At the time, her then-husband Patrick Clancy was out running errands. This isn't a normal case in the way of who done it. We know who did it. Lindsay's plea admits that she did, but her plea also says she isn't criminally responsible. Lindsay's defense argues she wasn't mentally sound at the time she killed the kids. She was in the midst of a mental break stemming from possible over-medication, failure of the medical system, and ultimately postpartum psychosis. Now, the Commonwealth disagrees, saying Lindsay acted deliberately with premeditation, methodically murdering the kids. Soon, it's going to be up to a jury to decide her fate. Did Lindsay Clancy have a mental break, or is she a cold-blooded murderer? There's been weeks of testimony so far and so much evidence for jurors to review. And I have to wonder if one major piece of evidence that they will look at is Lindsay's Apple Watch. We learned about this watch from the very first prosecution witness, Patrick Clancy himself. Patrick testified he handed over some of Lindsay's medication to investigators after his children were killed. But that wasn't the only evidence he discovered.
And inside the drawer, sir, do you recall that there were a number of items that I see trazodone, Lindsay Clancy, prescribed on January 5, 23. Creatinine, January. Creatinine, 100 milligrams, prescribed for Lindsay Clancy, December 21st. Lorazepam, they're all empty too, right?
Yeah.
Because these are what she shot down with that lemonade or water or whatever was in the cup that she ground up these pills, right? Lamotrigine, prescribed to Lindsay Clancy, December 16th, 22. Mirtazapine, prescribed to Lindsay Clancy, January 23. Those are in this drawer, and they were all empty, right?
Right.
You observed that, right? There's something else that was in the drawer. Do you recognize that?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's her Apple Watch.
Her Apple Watch. This is the Apple Watch that apparently the police used to go up the stairs, downstairs, heart rate, things of that nature, right?
Yep.
They never even seized it, did they? They left it in the drawer, right?
Apparently.
On recross, Patrick gave a bit more insight into the watch.
Now, in reference to the Apple Watch, sir, how many Apple Watches did she have? If you
Just
know?
one.
Just one. It's the only one she had. The police never seized it, right?
Correct.
And the drugs that were in the drawer, the empty drugs and the pill bottles from January, December, 22, 23, the police never seized them, did they?
No.
That testimony happened early on in the case, and some of us were thinking, odd that it wasn't initially collected by police. And it seems defense attorney Kevin Reddington thought the same thing. For when MSP Captain John Santos was called to testify for the Commonwealth, we heard this.
So it made sense as an investigator that electronic media and things of that nature would be important, correct?
Yes.
Was there an Apple Watch involved in this investigation, if you know?
I believe there was an Apple Watch recovered after the fact. We didn't recover at the search warrant, if I recall correctly.
Do you know when it was recovered?
I don't know exactly off the top of my head, no,
The
sir.
Apple Watch that I recovered with Pat Clancy?
I believe so, sir. Yeah, I believe there was a watch that was turned into us after the fact. It wasn't recovered during the search warrant.
So looking at this drawer, do you recall that next to the bed, or in the bedroom, there was a nightstand and there was a drawer? And inside the drawer were a bunch of pill bottles, an Apple Watch, sleeping aids, things of that nature?
I didn't search that drawer, sir.
Okay, I don't mean to embarrass you, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Do you know why nobody bothered to search that drawer?
I don't know that it wasn't searched. I just know that I didn't search it, sir. So it may have been searched, and maybe whoever searched it didn't feel that that information was pertinent to seize. I can't speak for them, but I can tell you that I didn't search that drawer.
Weird that police didn't collect this right away. Conspiracy theorists online say that was on purpose. And I have to stress, these are conspiracy theories. They're not substantiated at all or even discussed in court. But some online believe that Patrick Clancy really killed his kids. They say he was never properly investigated by Massachusetts investigators, some alleging he even had an in with them and that investigators left the Apple Watch behind on purpose. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Patrick Clancy is not a suspect in this case. He's not been charged. He has been cleared by police. And in fact, Lindsay admits that she killed the kids. That being said, the data collected from the Apple Watch is still kind of odd. We really got an inside look into all of this when the Commonwealth called a Cellubrite expert to the stand.
Primarily, I knew that the date of the incident was 24th of January 2023, so that was the main focus of my analysis. But some of the data I was aware could be from further afield than that, so I took a look of, I think it was around 3 weeks before that, so early January to late January.
And I'm going to walk you through all the highlights of this testimony. I mean, the inconsistencies of the data and what it could all mean. But I know some of you want an even closer look. This is one of those cases that keeps people up at night. We all want a closer look at the evidence in the Lindsay Clancy case. I have access to it, and now you can too. For behind every major scandal is a paper trail the public rarely gets to see. If you haven't heard yet, you can go beyond the headlines with case files on the Law&Crime Plus app. This is where you get direct access to the raw evidence, uncensored body camera recordings, crime scene images, video recordings of interrogations, and so much more. You can analyze the facts and uncover the truth for yourself. Plus, you get ad-free streaming of all your favorite law and crime and court TV shows. Unlock the evidence room today. Head over to lawandcrimeplus.com, enter promo code SCANDAL, and start your 30-day free trial. Now back to the expert testimony. Ian Whiffen testified that movement can be tracked from both the Apple Watch and the iPhone.
The user of the phone would be able to access the health data via the health application, where the information is broken down to explain how many steps have been taken over a particular period of time, the approximate distance that was travelled, the number of stair flights that were climbed. That data is stored on the device itself in a database. So as a forensic examiner, I can take a look at that database in its raw form, understand exactly where that information is coming from, and present it to the user of our forensic tools in a slightly more forensic-friendly method than the user of the application on the phone would see.
But the heart rate data comes from only one device.
The user of the phone would be able to access the health data via the health application, where the information is broken down to explain how many steps have been taken over a particular period of time, the approximate distance that was travelled, the number of stair flights that were climbed. That data is stored on the device itself in a database. So as a forensic examiner, I can take a look at that database in its raw form, understand exactly where that information is coming from, and present it to the user of our forensic tools in a slightly more forensic-friendly method than the user of the application on the phone would see.
How is the heart rate recorded and sent to the phone?
There are sensors on the Apple Watch itself on the rear, which periodically check the heart rate at any given time, and that information is sent to the phone via Bluetooth.
And are you aware of how often an iWatch will record the data and report it to an iPhone?
The actual cadence at which the watch is checking would depend on what the user's doing. So if you were in the middle of a workout, it would be a lot more consistent than just periodically throughout the day. And I actually don't know how often it is throughout the day. If you're not doing any particular workout, there doesn't seem to be a set cadence. Every device I've looked at, it's slightly different.
Now that we understand how everything works, let's take a closer look at Lindsay's data from the day the children died. That was January 24th, 2023.
And what was the last time a heart rate was reported from the watch to the defendant's phone?
So the last heart rate recorded was at 17:23:52, so 23 minutes past 5 in the afternoon, with a heart rate of 57 beats per minute.
What was the average heart rate for the day for the defendant's phone?
There was a range of heart rates going between as low as, I believe, around 50 and as high as around 122. On average, it was around high 80s, early 90s.
And so at 5:23 p.m., the last recording of her heart rate was 57?
Correct.
And there aren't any further heart rates reported to the phone after that point, correct?
That's correct.
There are a few things to note here. First, the last recording from the Apple Watch comes at 5:23 p.m. Eagle-eye viewers notice that's just 1 minute before the infamous 5:24 Surface Pro email Patrick Clancy sent, allegedly from the house. This could just be a coincidence, but the next thing to note is Lindsay's last tracked heart rate was 57 beats per minute. And that's a relatively normal resting heart rate. Usually 57 BPM would mean the person is calm or relaxing. But some wonder, is that too low of a heart rate to be actively strangling her kids? With physical exertion or adrenaline going, someone's heart rate could be 100 or over. Now, conspiracy theories here go wild once again, saying maybe Lindsay didn't really kill the kids. But there's another more logical explanation.
And what are some of the reasons why a watch would no longer be reporting a heart rate to the phone?
If the watch was taken off, if the watch was turned off,
If the battery died?
the battery was dead, yes.
So it's possible Lindsay took off the Apple Watch on purpose, knowing that it would record her heart rate. The prosecution would argue that shows premeditation. She knew it was wrong to kill. She removed the data tracker that could prove she was committing a crime. And we'll circle back to all of that in a minute, but first, I gotta talk about the flight climb data.
Flight climb is information which the Apple Health application stores every time it detects that you walk up a flight of stairs. So a flight of stairs would be considered either a 3-meter or 10-foot incline at over 16 steps. So the device has detected that both the altitude has changed by 10 feet and there were steps being walked at the same time. The altitude is being monitored by a barometer or an altimeter, which is inside the device, just measuring for differences in air pressure.
And this information, the flight climb data, can that be monitored by both a watch and your phone if you have it on you?
It is. Both devices have got the barometers built in. Both devices can monitor flight climb events.
Does that show the last flight climbs recorded on either the defendant's phone or watch?
It does. It shows that there was additional flight climb events logged by the phone, which were not logged by the watch at 17:03 and 17:33.
So these records indicate that at 5:03 p.m., the defendant's iPhone was with the person as it went up the stairs, and then at 5:33 p.m., the iPhone was with the person as it went up the 2 flights of stairs.
Correct.
And there's a time difference there. The start time is 5:33 p.m., and the end time is 5:38 p.m. For 2 flights of stairs. So that's roughly 5 minutes in between the 2 flights. Is there a way to explain that length of time?
The way the Apple Health data records this information, aggregates it, it tries to group events together. So in this case, it would have recognized that there was a flight climb on the phone at around 17:33:34 and a second one at around 17:38:33, and it just grouped them both into one event. It doesn't mean that it took 5 minutes to walk up 2 flights of stairs. It's just within that 5-minute period, there were 2 flight climbs.
So if I have my phone in my pocket and I climb up a flight of stairs and then I spend a few minutes on that floor, and then still with my phone in my pocket go up another flight of stairs, that's representative of what we're seeing here at 5:33?
Correct. There tends to be around a 10-minute window where it tries to check every 10 minutes, but it can reduce that window in a case like this where it sees that there's group data within a smaller time period.
Here's the bottom line. Lindsay's Apple Watch stopped recording movement at 5:23 p.m., but the phone stopped recording movement at 5:38.
And what we have here at 5:33 p.m., we have the flight climb started, is that correct?
Correct.
And flight climb ended at 5:38, so
Yes.
that line again connecting them?
Correct. So 2 flight climbs occurred during that time period.
And in between when the flight climb started and the flight climb ended, you have the 2 calls, the incoming call that was missed from Patrick and then the outgoing call to Patrick, correct?
Correct.
So the first flight climbed had already been started. Someone had already started climbing up a flight of stairs when that first unanswered call happened, correct?
So flight climb started is how it's listed within the database and within the software. But it actually, the flight climb time is when the flight climb has been recognized by the device as the device has already climbed up those stairs. So even though it says flight climb started, that's technically the time that the flight climb or the first flight climb had ended.
So where it says 5:33:34 flight climb started, that actually indicates the person has gone up that first flight of stairs already.
Yes, that indicates the phone has now realized I'm 3 meters higher than I was the last time I checked. Therefore, a flight climb has already being completed at that point.
And then the calls happen, and then the phone realizes at 5:38 that another flight has been climbed.
Correct.
On cross, the defense took a closer look at these timestamps.
Yes, the last heart rate was 5:23:52.
52, okay. 5:23 and 52 seconds. And then I believe the phone and watch stopped recording at 5:38, was it?
The last usage of the, let me double check this. I believe the last usage of the phone to record flight climb data was at 5:38, yes.
All right, and after 5:38, it's pretty much blackout. There's no further information or recording, right?
Yes, not until like the phone was seized by police, I believe.
By the
But
police.
there's other activity, but appeared to be after the incident.
So the further activity would have been the following morning on the 25th of January, say around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning?
I ended my analysis on the 24th.
Okay. Well, so 5:23 p.m., the watch stops recording information. 5:38 p.m., both the watch and the phone stopped recording any information until the police picked up the phone apparently the following day, right?
Again, there would have been activity later on, but it wasn't usage, it wasn't health data. It would have been things like incoming calls, if
Okay,
there
so
were any.
when you went through the stair climbing and talked about the steps that were taken, the distance that was taken, that stopped at 5:38 p.m., right?
Correct.
Now, you don't know, when I say you, I mean as a witness, but also the police, whoever was wearing the watch, for example, if Lindsay's wearing the watch or carrying the phone, after 5:38, you don't know what was happening at 5:39.
Correct.
You don't know what was happening at 5:40, 5:45, right?
Correct.
Right up till 5:58, 6 o'clock p.m., right?
Purely the data on the device.
So it could have been, the phone could have been put down, the watch could have been put down, battery died, whatever those issues could be, and the person would still be going down the stairs, going up the stairs, going in the backyard, doing push-ups, whatever.
Correct.
You just don't know, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And here's where the conspiracy theories just get going again, because it was 5:23 and 5:38 when the Apple Watch and the iPhone respectively stopped recording on January 24th, 2023, but the iPhone started recording again the next day.
So if you jump ahead to January 25, 2023, let's say, is that 7 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
Okay. And that says, what is it measuring at 7 o'clock in the morning on January 25?
So this is for the hour of health data. So it's been aggregated and it shows that between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. There was 47 meters traveled.
Okay. And then it goes on and it talks about, again, 7 o'clock in some seconds, it talks about 134 distance traveled.
Yes.
Okay. And, for example, January 25 at 8 o'clock in the morning, it talks about distance traveled, steps counted, and distance would be 47
Yes.
meters or feet?
Meters.
Okay. So is that information that is coming off of the cell phone, the Apple Watch, or what?
That's coming from the watch and the phone and being displayed
Right,
as
so-
one amount of information.
It's coming from the watch, right?
The way that the data is presented there, it's coming from the watch or the phone.
Okay. And the data's coming from Celebrate, right?
Correct.
And Celebrate is God's gift to cell phone searches, right?
I like to think so.
I mean, you work for them, and you're also a guy that created all of this stuff for them, pretty much, right?
I've created some other tools, yes.
If I tell you, sir, that January 25 at 8 o'clock in the morning, Lindsay Clancy was in a coma, laying in a bed with tubes coming out of her body and certainly not wearing her Apple Watch. How did that happen?
Based purely on the report there, I'd suggest the data came from the phone rather than the watch.
As I just told you about the watch. Did you ever look at this watch?
No, we can't actually pull data directly from the watch. We pull it from the phone.
How do you look at a watch?
We extract the data from the phone, which is synchronized to from the watch to the phone.
Okay, so I'm handing you, is that an Apple Watch?
It appears to be, yes.
Okay. And if I suggest to you that this was found a number of days later in Lindsay's bedroom in a drawer that the police never seized, have you ever seen this before?
I've never seen this before, no.
It does seem a bit suspicious, but there may have been an explanation revealed on cross.
And you said that the watch syncs itself to the phone, relaying all data that it's collecting to the phone, correct?
Correct.
And Lindsay's watch was synced to Lindsay's phone, correct?
It was.
And if you were able to look at the data from the dates defense counsel mentioned from the extraction itself, you would be able to tell whether the January 25th data was coming from the watch or the phone, correct?
I would, yes.
But you can't from what he showed you, correct?
From the printout, no. I'd need the actual data.
And if on January 25th, the police have the phone, and they're bringing it to an evidence room, and then they're bringing it to storage room, is that going to show steps and distance traveled?
Yeah, whenever the device is turned on, or whenever the phone is turned on, it will consistently record steps walked regardless of who's carrying it. It will consistently record flights climbed regardless of who's carrying it.
And so if the watch is turned off in a drawer somewhere, the phone would be what's relaying, or not relaying, but the phone would be what's recording the distance traveled and the steps taken, not the watch, correct?
That's the presumption, yeah. If the watch is turned off, it's not doing anything, any data would be from the phone.
Wow, there's a lot of evidence in this case that people just cannot stop talking about, but it's really the Apple Watch that I personally cannot stop thinking about. And I want to take a deeper dive into that evidence and more with today's guest. It's attorney Heather Hansen. Heather, thank you for coming on. And you shared with me before we started recording, you're actually from Massachusetts.
I am from Massachusetts, and between this and Karen Reed, I feel like there has been an avalanche of cases and things for trial watchers to really obsess over.
Oh my gosh, there truly, truly has been. And this one has blown up in a way I did not expect. The way that people are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it may be, Reddit, forums, talking about all sorts of conspiracy theories and evidence. And the one that I keep seeing coming to the forefront is this Apple Watch. Why do you think everyone's going crazy about this?
You know, I think, Sierra, people have a tendency to believe technology over people, and to think that the technology is the be-all, end-all evidence in the case. And so when you've got something that looks so formal and looks so correct, I think people tend to put a lot of weight on that. And the Apple Watch has told us quite a bit about what Lindsay was doing in those final hours.
And I have to ask, because this is very fair, the way that we rely on technology and DNA, people put a lot of stock in it, which is great too. But obviously sometimes there are inconsistencies. For example, in this case, the Apple Watch stops recording at, I believe it's 5:23, but then the cell phone stops kind of recording all of the data at 5:38 p.m. So there's that inconsistency there that people are kind of saying, oh my God, what was going on? Is this a conspiracy? What do you make of that time lapse?
I don't make anything of it. Listen, I think that we have seen, and have seen in this case, situations where the Apple Watch has not been correct. These pieces of technology do make mistakes, and I think that Apple Watches especially, to be honest, Sarah, if it had been flipped and the phone had stopped and the Apple Watch had kept going, that would have been more shocking to me, because I think the phone has been around longer, it's more established technology. The Apple Watches are relatively new and they're attached to the body, which means that they don't have the same sort of necessary path to follow as the cell phone does.
Yeah, and I think something that people are pointing to a lot too is what happened when it stopped recording at 5:23. Did she take it off? Did she turn it off? What could have happened? And I guess my question for you as an attorney is, does it matter why it stopped?
No, I think that when people are doing those questions and talking about those things, and I understand it, but that really goes down what you've talked about, the conspiracy theories. In this case, we have to remember that the prosecution is not saying that anyone else did this, that anything else happened. In this case, Kevin Reddington, who's doing a phenomenal job, is moving forward with a defense that says she admitted to killing her children. And the defense is a lack of criminal responsibility defense. It's not that she didn't do it, that someone else did it, that there's something else going on here. And so what everyone else seems to be very interested in is not going to be something that the jury is going to be considering. They're going to be considering all of the evidence, mostly about her psychological status, the doctors she saw, the medications she was taking, the people that she complained to. That's going to be more their focus than the minutes on the Apple Watch.
And I think I kind of understand, right? Like if people are backseat detectives or armchair detectives and they're like, oh my God, what if we put together these 2 times, the intermission between the two, what could it lead to crack the case? I get that. I work in true crime. I love it. It's so interesting. But at the same time, we know based on Lindsay Clancy's plea, she's not denying she did it. She said she did it. She's just saying she's not criminally responsible. And can you kind of explain this to me? Because I had to read the statute multiple times to totally understand it. Because of course the burden of proof is on the Commonwealth, but here it seems like it's almost even more that they have to prove she was criminally responsible.
That's 100% correct. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was criminally responsible, that she did not have a mental disease or defect that would make her it such that she is not criminally responsible. That is a big burden. And we saw even in the, one of the things that we have to remember, Sierra, is we have just gotten into the defense case. Even in the prosecution's case, where people should be sort of on the prosecution's side because they're putting in all their evidence, still, I think everyone was walking away with, at the very least, questions about whether or not she was criminally responsible due to what was very well established as the psychological issues going on with her. And if that's happening during the prosecution's case, then in the defense case, when we continue to hear from experts all about her psychological status and what it means to have this type of postpartum problem, it is going to be very difficult, I think, for the jury to think that the prosecution has met their burden.
I keep going back to the same thing over and over because, I mean, I live in Massachusetts and I wonder, what if I got called for this jury? I mean, I'm not in Plymouth County, but let's just say these are literally my peers. We live in the same Commonwealth. If I was called, I do not envy their job because they really have to parse through some really intense things. First of all, the evidence that we've been talking about, but second of all, going through the determination of criminal responsibility, that to me it's hard for me to wrap my brain around. And I work in true crime, I work in law, in all of this. So do you think that's something that's going to be tricky for the jurors to kind of discuss?
I think it is going to be tricky. There's 2 things there. I think that your point is a very good one. We don't talk enough about the trauma to jurors. For all, especially for the audience here, right? We're true crime watchers. And so for you, this is fun. But imagine that you're not a true crime watcher. And in fact, maybe you don't even necessarily enjoy these types of cases. And then imagine too, that it's now your responsibility to come to a verdict that's going to impact Lindsay Clancy's life for the rest of her life. That is traumatic. And then add to that the fact that you have to see these terrible autopsy pictures while you watch Lindsay Clancy sob in front of you. The impact on jurors is one that we don't appreciate enough. More and more states are now having counseling for jurors after these cases because of the psychological impact of everything that I just described and so much more. So there's that part that you brought up. And then there's the legal standards, the legalese, the jury instructions are always, in any case, so confusing. Jurors, I think, oftentimes just shut down and they end up deciding these cases more based on the facts and their intuition and their common sense than the nuances of the legal statutes. But they are tasked with trying to figure out those nuances of legal statutes. So it is a very difficult job that these jurors have. And as much as we might all think, wow, what would it be like to be on this jury? It's not always as sort of exciting as it may seem from the outside.
And I mean, if we're just looking at the history of this case, it was ruled by the judge that we, Law&Crime, anyone, could not broadcast the 911 call. We could not record the autopsy photos. It was just that the jurors could see and hear those things. And I do think in a way it was to protect the Clancy family. The grandparents have been there every day. There's cousins, there's sisters, aunts, and uncles who have to hear this. I mean, that would be devastating and traumatic for them. But we have to remember the jurors saw all of that and the trauma that they could have. We did not see what was going on. My photographer in the courtroom said they were crying. There was not a dry eye in the jury box during all of that. So they really have a heavy burden here. And something you pointed out too was the nuance. I mean, the fact that we have these armchair detectives who are going through and talking about the timestamps and everything, it's fun to do. I totally get it. But are jurors doing that?
No, I don't think so. One of the things that I'll say, I tried cases for 25 years. I talked to scores of juries and probably 100 jury members, and they take their oath very seriously, very seriously. They do not, as a whole, look to outside sources because they're not supposed to. They really want to fulfill their oath. A lot of people leave jury duty and say, it is the closest thing I'll ever come to serving my country. And so this is something that I take very seriously, that I wanted to do a really good job. And so I don't think they're doing this outside stuff. Plus, if they're not listening to outside sources, their job is not to determine whether Lindsay did it. They're admitting it in the courtroom. Their job is not to determine whether someone else did it or is someone else to blame. Their job is to determine something that you have already pointed out is a very difficult determination to make, which is, was she legally, criminally responsible? And to dive in to the medical issues that are at the real crux of this case.
Mm-hmm. And I remember Kevin Reddington in his opening statement, or it could have been jury voir dire when I was there for it, but he said something to the effect of, thank you so much for serving. You will never forget this case. And I mean, just sitting in the courtroom, it's very stark that Lindsay is in a wheelchair because she attempted to die by suicide. She's paralyzed. Like, no matter who is on the stand or what evidence is in front of you, you can see that. There's a constant reminder here of what happened. And I think the jurors, to your point, do take their job seriously and they are paying attention and their emotions have to be weighing on them for this. And I guess I have to ask you kind of to go back to the conspiracy theories of it all, just because that's what people are talking about. Yeah. Of course, I'm not hearing from jurors, but so Patrick Clancy, everyone is pointing the finger at him, and back to this Apple Watch, people are like, oh, is it suspicious that detectives didn't find this when they were searching the Duxbury home, that Patrick turned it over? What do you make of that theory?
I mean, listen, I understand why people want a simpler explanation. And it is a simpler explanation for our brains to understand that someone else would have done this rather than a mother do it to herself. And in such a way, right, for even the suicide attempts, when we could talk about the carotid artery, all those things, right? And then the jumping out of the window. But I think that it is not, the investigators most certainly, and I know the conspiracy theories are saying that they didn't, investigated other possibilities. But Lindsay has always admitted to this. She attempted to kill herself, and we just heard from an expert this week, in a very violent way. She jumped head first out a window, Sierra. I mean, it is a stretch to imagine that the Apple Watch was going to be the smoking gun in this picture, given everything else that the investigators found. And the other thing that's worth mentioning that just popped into my head is that because she admitted it, trial watchers are not seeing the investigators say it was her fingerprints on the neck. We're not hearing, and this is actually an important thing that just popped into my head, but we're not hearing all of that because it's admitted. And so you're not seeing the police officer come in and say, we saw her DNA. It wasn't anyone else's DNA. It was her DNA on the children. It was her DNA on the exercise bands, because it's not contested. And so that's not part of this case. And so it's understandable for all of us trial watchers who watch these cases all the time and typically see that. When you don't see it, you start to wonder about these things. So I think we just got to remember the context of this case and what the jury is actually being tasked with determining in their verdict.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had friends, truly people coming out of the woodwork about this case, people from high school I haven't heard from. And they're like, oh my God, Patrick Clancy's DNA was on the exercise bands. And I'm like, okay, he lived there. He probably used them to exercise, if that's what was happening, number one. And number two, is this even relevant? I mean, a lot of people are jumping in and this is the first trial that they've ever watched. And it's great. I love to watch trials. I love to dabble in all of this, but I don't know if everybody who's a trial watcher is understanding the legalese of all of this and the weight of all of this too, because this is a really heavy case that we're talking about. And I guess let's just kind of future surf a little bit. We're in Kevin Reddington's case right now at the time of this recording, the defense, I should say. What do you anticipate anticipate, because I know that sometimes I've never covered a criminal responsibility case in Massachusetts, but I've covered the insanity defense in other states rather, and I've seen where it would be the Commonwealth or the state presents the prosecution, then the defense, and then it goes back to the prosecution kind of to do the insanity of it all. Is that what would happen here?
I don't think that is what is going to happen here. I think, and it could be what could happen here. I think that Reddington has indicated that he most likely will rest on Thursday as we record this. So this week, it seems like he's going to rest. I think what you're going to hear from the defense is more expert witness testimony about what is postpartum psychosis, what is postpartum depression, what medications she was taking, how that could impact her psychologically. And I think that the prosecution has done what they're going to do. Now, they may come back and try to fix some of what has happened with the defense and some of these experts. But I think that they have put on the majority of what we're going to see in that regard already.
And just for background for our viewers, we're recording this on Wednesday. It's going to be posted later this weekend. So this is where we are right now. By the time this airs, we could be heading towards closings or deliberations. And I guess that's my last question for you, Heather. Obviously, we don't know what's going on inside of the jury deliberation room. I mean, maybe a juror will want to come on this show and talk to me about it after, but for now, we're not asking any questions. We're letting them do their job. What do you anticipate the deliberations would look like? Long, short, a lot of discussion? What's your kind of hypothesis?
It really depends. As trial watchers, I think a lot of us think that this should be very quick. Like, how could they even imagine? I think most of us are thinking, how could they even imagine that Lindsay would be held criminally responsible for this? And I know there are some people who disagree with that. But, when a case is this heavy and this sad, jurors take that very seriously. And so they will likely go through the different witnesses and what the different witnesses said and what were the pros and cons of those witnesses and how can you weigh this person against that person. But remember, they're ultimately coming to the decision as to whether or not she was criminally responsible, not whether or not she did it. And whether or not someone else did it. And so they are going to be weighing all of those experts. I think that, you never know. There could be one holdout. There could be a couple of people who feel as though she should be held responsible. It could be that, more than one. It's also important to understand who the jurors are. As we talk about the verdict and start to talk about those deliberations, I think we'll be talking more about the makeup of this jury, what they look like, because I think that, I talk a lot now in the work that I do about knowing your jury, because those people, is it more men than women? Are they younger? Are they older? Have they experienced any psychological or mental health issues in their own lives? That impacts the way that they look at this case. And that's something that we haven't been talking about a lot. But ultimately, one of the things I love that Judge Sullivan said at the beginning of some of these expert testimonies is that, I wrote it down on a piece of paper to share with somebody else. He said, experts don't decide cases, juries do. And that's the thing. We oftentimes, one of my clients once gave me a paperweight that says, and I have it right here, a good lawyer knows the law, a great lawyer knows the judge, a little tongue in cheek, right? But I always said, okay, that's fine, but the best lawyers know the jury. You've got to be able to speak to the jury. Reddington does that really well. In fact, even today, he was talking to an expert, and he stopped them and he said, what does that mean? Yeah. And then the expert said it in very straightforward language, and he's like, that's right. Like, he knows his jury. He knows that all of these big fancy legal words and these big fancy medical words are not going to connect with this jury. And as we get closer to getting the case in the hands of the jury, we need to recognize that who they are, how they see the world, is going to be of utmost importance.
Yeah, and it does matter too. And I know the jury questionnaire, I saw it when I was there in the courtroom, and it talks about, have you experienced mental health issues? Do you know somebody who has in your family, close friend? And I mean, odds are they themselves have, or someone in their family. I mean, most of us at least know somebody who's diagnosed with at least anxiety or depression, whatever it may be. So they're going to pull on their own experiences too. I'm very eager to see what happens in deliberations and ultimately the verdict. Heather, I know you're going to keep following it. I'd love to have you back on to talk more. Thanks for coming on Scandal today.
Sierra, thank you for having me.
We're going to continue to follow this case and bring you all of the latest updates right here on Scandal. And for complete live coverage of the Lindsay Clancy trial, make sure to tune into Law&Crime, where we're live streaming it with gavel-to-gavel coverage. And that is where today's episode of Scandal leaves us for now. If you like what you saw and you want to see more or connect with me on social media, you can find me on places like Instagram at Sierra Gillespie. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.